This week, our topic is communication in organizations. Communication affects almost every aspect of managerial behavior. We will cover some of the most common and most important contexts and ways in which organizational members communicate with each other. Communication skills can be learned and developed through practice, such as role-playing, and through better understanding of theories of communication, such as what we'll talk about today, including what communication channels or media might be most effective in a given situation, or how to reduce noise, which is distortion in a message that occurs between the communicator's intended message and then what the receiver actually interprets and understands in that message. The definition of communication that we will be using today is simply the process by which a person or group shares some type of information with another person or group. In general, we can identify several basic reasons for communicating, or goals of a given communication. These goals of communication relate to communications outside of organizational or workplace settings as well, but here we will focus on examples within an organizational setting. One reason for or goal of a communication might be to share information. Not everyone in an organization is always privy to all of the relevant information all of the time. This is one of the major functions and benefits of an organization as opposed to individual people working alone. We can share our collective knowledge and skills with others in the organization so that we can realize a gestalt in which the whole of the organization is more than just the simple sum of the individual people or parts which comprise it. Information sharing can be formal and intentional, such as a new employee orientation session in which organizational members like managers, HR, or senior employees convey information about the company history, perhaps also the organizational chart or important policies and procedures, and role expectations for the new employees. But sharing of information can also be more informal, such as the grapevine or gossip mill, and occurring through people's social networks within the organization as opposed to the formal chain of command designated in an organizational chart. A related goal to sharing information is that communication can meet social and relational needs of individuals, our needs to be understood and to understand others. Another primary goal of communication might be to persuade. For example, while employee training might involve sharing or teaching of new information or knowledge from the trainer to the trainee, some training may also serve to persuade in addition to convey information. For example, customer service training for employees might involve not only teaching the employees what proper protocols and policies are for different types of customer issues, but also helping employees understand why customer service is important to the organization's mission, why they should care, and why they should follow the policies and procedures, even beyond simply that they would get in trouble if they don't. This is one of several models proposed by different researchers and experts in communication, and this model describes a process in which an individual, labeled as the sender, so on the left-hand side of the diagram, intentionally transmits a message to another individual or individuals, and that's noted in the diagram as the receiver on the right-hand side. Because human capabilities and technology do not allow us to directly read each other's minds or thoughts, at least not currently that I know of, we must use language, so verbal language or nonverbal language, to encode our message, whatever's inside of our head that we want to convey to someone else. And so first we must encode a message and then choose some medium or channel through which to transmit that message. So channels could include in-person, such as coworkers chatting together in person in a meeting room to discuss a change in their work schedule. The channel message could also be written or online, so an online training manual and learning system platform which employees are using. It could also be a written document or memo from management about a change in work policy or procedure. So once the sender has encoded and transmitted the message, then the receiver of the message must decode the message. That message, as decoded, may or may not be the same as what was intended by the sender. Within the model, you see that the circle with the word noise in it, and it has arrows pointing out to all aspects of the process and those involved. So noise is anything that can distort the received message from what was the intended message. And noise can include noise in the literal sense, such as if you're trying to have a conversation with colleagues in a loud restaurant and you aren't able to hear everything that's said. Noise can also include psychological or social factors, such as if the receiver is very tired or distracted, or perhaps the receiver speaks a different language or comes from a different culture than the sender. So there's a miscommunication in that way. The model also shows a feedback loop from the receiver back to the original sender. In this case, the process basically reverses, with now the receiver is the encoder of a message of feedback and then transmits it to the original sender. And even if no feedback message is transmitted, this lack of response is arguably a form of feedback. And the feedback loops allow for senders to become receivers and then get information about whether their message was received and also whether the message was understood as intended and what the receiver thinks or feels about the information, or if they're planning to take any action based on it. Many times in communication, we focus more on the sending part of the model than the receiving. Specifically, how we ourselves can form and transmit messages effectively to others so that we can inform, persuade, or form social connections with others. However, there are also things we can do as receivers to reduce noise in the process and to help improve the efficiency of our communications and also the effectiveness of communicating messages correctly and accurately. Research shows that very few of us are highly skilled at listening for deep meaning in messages. And it's important to note here, by listening, we're not only talking about listening to auditory messages. Listening could also include other means of being a receiver of the message, such as reading an email. Dale Breckenridge Carnegie was an American writer and lecturer and the developer of a very famous set of courses in self-improvement, salesmanship, public speaking, and developing interpersonal skills. And on the importance of active listening and being a good listener, Carnegie said, "You can make more friends in 2 months by becoming interested in other people than you can in 2 years by trying to get other people interested in you." This is a list of common barriers to active listening, or another way to think of this is that they're common sources of noise that occur on the receiving side of the communication process. The first is a tendency to evaluate or start jumping ahead to making decisions or judgments about the information rather than continuing to listen to new incoming information. The next is misreading of nonverbal cues. Another is having a personal or focus or a selective focus. Another issue is that thinking is faster than speaking, so our minds can race ahead, and that might be related to that tendency to evaluate as well. In our heads, we could be thinking about many things faster than what anyone is able to speak. Tendency to advise, so rather than just listening, trying to solve problems for other people. And here is a link to a video on accuracy of eyewitnesses, and it gets at several of these barriers to an eyewitness to a crime being accurate then in recalling later all of the details of the crime and of the person who had committed the crime. People are persuaded by issues that directly affect them. So it's important to study your audience by asking them questions, do research on their background and interests so that you have a better understanding of what they care about, and also what do they typically know or have had experienced, and also what might they not be familiar with that you as the sender or speaker are familiar with. For example, speakers should be aware of the use of jargon, slang, and acronyms in their communication with other individuals and groups who do not share the same career or industry background. In fact, as shown in this quote, Elon Musk has advised employees to avoid using acronyms or nonsense words for objects and processes. He said, in general, anything that requires an explanation inhibits communication. We don't want people to have to memorize a glossary just to function at Tesla.